Hi, I'm Renee Seltzer, founder of Feeding My Kid, and in today's episode, I'd like to introduce you to Tammy Bishop, who's an occupational therapist and feeding specialist. So she's going to be able to answer your questions that we often get through Facebook and on the website. So I'm really excited to introduce her. So she's going to go through and just answer a variety of questions, provide insights that we don't often have, and just being an occupational therapist, she's going to be able to see and help us understand, when is it that you need to see an occupational therapist? I'm so excited to be covering all these topics with her, and let's get started.
There are children, this goes back to advice people will give you about your child's picky eating. And I've heard from many families that someone will say, well, just let them starve. They'll eat eventually. There are children. I just want to warn parents out there that there are children. And if you're a parent of this child, I do feel badly for you. And you really do need to seek out occupational therapy for help. There are children who will starve themselves, who will absolutely eat nothing if they're not given some food that is safe for them. So I just want people to know that if you're a person who says to another parent, well, just starve him, or just don't give him what he wants until he's, when he's hungry, he'll eat what you give him. That is not the case. That is not the case.
And I was going to say that goes back to if you give them the food, let's go back to it's a lasagna or a casserole, and you know your child's not going to eat it. Well, just to sit there and watch the food that they're not going to eat is a form of pressure. Mm-hmm. It's not an enjoyable experience for your child. They kind of sit there, they look at the food, they're like, I'm not going to eat it. And it just makes it all not enjoyable. So really having that safe food, if they liked cream of corn, make sure the cream of corn is there so they feel like I could still eat something. Mm-hmm. And then that pressure goes down. And what you're doing is you're conditioning them that there's always something I could eat at the table. Mm-hmm. The table is a safe place to go.
Yep.
It's not going to be stressful. No one's going to say that I have to eat the lasagna. I could just eat the cream of corn. And I know if it's bread, whatever that safe food is, I know there's one thing I'm going to be able to eat. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really just important that you don't kind of play that battle of wills because kids, they will do things, to win the battle of wills. Mm-hmm. That's really a great thing. And I think just the safe foods in general, anything to make it, I think, less stressful without being the parent that gives in to the chicken nuggets every night, right? So you don't want to make it so not stressful on yourself that you're just going to give your child a few foods that they're going to eat because you still want to serve what the family is eating. I think that's really important.
Yep. I also recommend, and this comes from other feeding therapists that I've heard mention, that it's really a great idea to alternate the child's preferred food so that you don't have them eating chicken nuggets every night for dinner.
Yes, the rotation rule, right?
Yes. So try to rotate the food as much as possible. And so there are children who eat only chicken nuggets. And so what Dr. Toomey recommends is changing the chicken nuggets so that it's not the same every time, so that you might cut it just once and make it into 2 sticks, or you might cut it into cut it 2 times and make it into 4 squares. So she recommends changing it so that the food's not the same every time.
So we have videos on the rotation rule that Tammy just mentioned and gateway foods or food chaining. And that was in the video we cover, okay, we'll buy a different brand of chicken nuggets. So what you're doing is slowly transitioning them to different. I make a real point that my kids never eat the same kind of pasta. So they eat bow tie, they eat lasagna, they eat linguine, and I just rotate them all so they see them once in a while, but they never get used to, I could only eat spaghetti.
Yes.
Because there's definitely kids who I could only eat spaghetti, and that's the only pasta I'll eat. Well, let's start rotating through. Linguine is a little bit wider, or angel hair is a little bit thinner, so start transitioning of the foods that they're already comfortable with, make small changes to those foods, and then kind of move the barge that way.
Yes, and that reminds me, there are also children who are brand specific, so that if you...
I learned that one the hard way.
If they eat only, say, a certain kind of macaroni and cheese, and they see that it comes from the box or the container, if you try to introduce a new one, they're not going to eat it because it's not the one that they're used to.
So this is actually just for especially the parents who have real little ones, never let them see the box. This is something I learned with like yogurt, those little containers, it has to be this yogurt. So then I started buying Greek yogurt, putting it in there. Just don't do it. Try to avoid any type of box. So if it comes in a little Greek yogurt container, put it into a bowl. So always transition the food out of whatever container it came in so they don't become brand specific. It's the best advice I can give. And then so if they're really just bent on, I will only eat this kind of mac and cheese, what do you recommend for that?
Starting to change the flavor just a little bit.
Okay.
So maybe adding more milk instead of, or adding more milk in place of water, adding a little bit of butter to it, or if change the oil that you put in it. Some people put oil in it, some people put butter, so you can flip-flop it. Add a little bit of spice or herb to it. Herbs are tough because you can see them, and so children usually who are picky eaters, if they notice anything in their food, they're not eating it. So I would recommend something that you can put into it that changes the flavor but doesn't change
Like a
the
garlic
look.
powder, maybe?
Garlic
Or
powder.
onion powder?
I'm thinking like a mustard, just
Yeah.
a tiny bit of mustard to put a little tanginess into it, because that's yellow, and usually the mac and cheese is kind of like an orange yellow. So yeah, I would change it just slightly though, because usually the kids who are picky eaters can detect like minute changes to the food. So you have to be really careful, because you don't want to scare them away from their safe food.
Yeah.
Because for kids who do have a very limited diet, it's not safe to have them start dropping those foods.
Okay, so that's really a great point.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like I said, so if you have real little ones and you haven't gone down this path, you don't want to go down this path,
No,
because
no.
it's a hard path to change, and it's a lot of strategic thinking by the parents, right? So you really have to, I think maybe one of the things that we talked about, and we have a Gateway Foods planner that you can just print out, and it allows you to write down all your foods. Do you want to kind of touch on that, of why a parent wants to catalog everything a child eats?
Well, sure, because then you could, well, not just for knowing or keeping track of what your child's eating, but also helps you to rotate the food, because you can say, well, Monday night we had this, so Tuesday night we're going to have that. But another great thing for cataloging the food is that if you ever have to go seek therapy, a therapist is going to ask you what your child eats and what your child doesn't eat. So it's nice to have that to give to them.
Yeah, so definitely watch the video, because I cover all of that. But one of the fabulous things about it, your child may eat more foods than you think they do.
Oh,
because
okay. Yep.
the potato is, if it's in wedges or French fries or mashed potato, they're all different potatoes, right?
That's true. Yep.
So,
yep.
really kind of think about what kinds of different chickens do your kids eat? These long chicken fingers? Do they eat chicken nuggets? Go ahead and write down some of that, because they're a little bit different. And then your therapist could say, oh, no, those are too similar. Or no, that's great, but definitely mashed potato and a French fry, totally different foods,
Yep.
even though they're both potato.
Yep, that's a great point. Yep.
Yeah. So really something. Once you start doing it, you're like, oh, my kid does eat more than I thought he does,
Yep.
and then you feel good about it.
Yep.
What do you do? Okay, so the kids explore those different flavors of the mac and cheese. What is the goal? Is the goal to transition them off to a different box? Is it homemade mac and cheese? Where do you stop that transition in the mac and cheese?
Where do you stop the transition? I think it depends on the child and the family. What are they looking for? If it's a family who can only do packaged mac and cheese, then perhaps you venture out into different kinds of packaged mac and cheese. If it's a family who does a lot of home cooking, then you're going to want to start to transition the child from the packaged mac and cheese to the home cooking or the home cooked mac and cheese. And so that depends on it could depend on so many variables, on the shape of the pasta, because you could possibly add a little bit of homemade pasta or mac and cheese into the processed mac and cheese. Sometimes having the children make the mac and cheese with you, we talked about this before, about having the child involved, may help them or motivate them to eat the homemade mac and cheese. It just depends on the child.
Yeah.
That's why even if you think your child has a very mild feeding difficulty, even consulting with an occupational therapist, you can really get some good ideas and some strategies on what works best just for your child. Because oftentimes when you read books and things on the internet, it's more general. And so children are all different. So if you want help specifically for your child, the best way is to get a therapist or a professional who does feeding therapy to help you.
Yeah, can't agree with that one more. How do you feel about hiding vegetables?
So I kind of flip-flop with the hiding the vegetables. I think it's a really cool idea that you can hide. There's a cookbook, and I forgot the name of it.
Seinfeld?
Sneaky Chef, I think it
Sneaky
is.
Chef,
Sneaky.
and then Seinfeld's wife also has one.
Okay.
Deceptively Delicious.
Yes,
Yeah.
maybe that's. I'm sorry, I'm not sure which book it is, but there's a recipe in there, a brownie recipe that has spinach and blueberries in it.
Yeah.
And someone made this for me, and I tried it, and I thought, wow, this is incredible. I can't believe that you really can't taste the spinach and the blueberries if it's done correctly. So I'm kind of a fan of that, but then also if you do hide vegetables in your child's food and the child discovers that, then there's this mistrust. The child doesn't trust you because they're afraid you're going to put something into their safe food. So it depends on the child.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a really good point about losing trust, because a lot of feeding issues happen to do with trust. Like, do I trust that you're not going to pressure me to eat this? Do I trust that you're not going to try to bait and switch me with what, you get pizza, but now you have to have kale too. And,
Right.
So trust is really a big part of it. I would say the other side of hiding vegetables is they never learn to eat those foods on their own because they don't really know that spinach is in the brownies. So if you're going to do that, and I do it just because I actually try to, in meatballs, I put a lot of stuff in it because I try to displace the meat, right? So I just want to have more healthy foods along with my meat than just the meatballs. But I always offer the food alongside it. So if I'm going to put salmon in the mac and cheese, they have a piece of salmon. If I'm going to do cauliflower, I do a lot of cauliflower and things, but I always offer it alongside it too. I've yet to get them to try cauliflower, but I will. They're going to learn to love it because they eat it all the time.
Yeah, right.
So they get the flavor of it, but yeah, that's my biggest thing is just make sure you serve it alongside it too.
Right. Yep. That's a great idea.
That's the same thing with those purees, those fruit purees for the baby food. If you ever look at the ingredients, they'll never often say on the front cover there's apple, but there's almost always apple on the inside. And they actually found there's a very, very small amount of vegetable in most of those. They got sued. So all of your big brands got sued because they, on the pictures, it looks like there's tons of vegetables, but it's really just pear and apple. And so just something to keep in mind, but that baby isn't learning how to eat any of those foods because it's overwhelmingly being covered up by apple and pear.
Yep, just like the juices.
Yeah, exactly. So just something to think about when you're giving those foods, that taste it yourself, and if it tastes really, really sweet, you're not tasting any of those vegetables. So they're not learning to appreciate them or like them.
Right.
Tammy, I'd like to really thank you for today. This was so informative. It was amazing.
You're welcome.
So
You're welcome.
We're very
Thank
lucky
you.
to have her. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask the questions in the comments below. So we'll shoot them back to Tammy and see if she has any additional advice for you. She has amazing articles on feedingmykid.com, so make sure you check that out. We have tons of articles and ideas on Pinterest, and we share them on Twitter and Facebook, so be sure to follow all of that. And we look forward to our next series.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I look forward to hearing from you.
All right, have a good one. And if you're in the Orlando area and you need an occupational therapist, Tammy is your gal.
No, thank you. Thanks, Renee.
All right, thanks everyone.